A sleeping giant does not merely wake up, it shakes the very foundations of the earth until the world is forever changed. In the early 1930s, the United States was a nation looking inward, healing from the deep, lingering scars of the Great Depression and hoping to remain an island of peace in a world increasingly shadowed by the clouds of distant, chaotic wars. The American spirit was focused on the soil, the local factory floor, and the quiet resilience of the home front, with a military that was barely ranked among the top 20 in the world at that time, smaller even than that of some mid-sized European nations. Yet, beneath this quiet, unassuming exterior, a massive industrial heart was beating with a potential that no foreign intelligence service truly understood, waiting for the precise moment when it would be called to defend the very concept of liberty. We often think of history as a series of inevitable events, but the transformation of America from an isolationist republic into the undisputed leader of the free world was a feat of collective will that defied every expectation of the era. It was a time when ordinary men and women realized that the survival of civilization rested on their shoulders, and with a quiet, steely determination, they did not blink. The silence of that isolationism was shattered forever on the morning of December 7, 1941, a date that would live in infamy and serve as the spark for the greatest mobilization of human effort in the history of our species. The attack on Pearl Harbor was designed to cripple the Pacific Fleet and demoralize the American public, but the aggressors made a fatal, historical miscalculation by underestimating the depth and ferocity of American resolve. Instead of retreating into fear, the nation rose as one single, unstoppable force, with millions of young men lining up at recruitment offices before the smoke had even cleared from the Hawaiian skies. What followed was not just a military response, but an entire civilization pivoting toward a single, absolute goal: total victory. It was in this moment of extreme crisis that the true character of the nation was revealed, showing a level of unity that seems almost mythological by today's standards. The world watched in awe as a nation that had been struggling with mass unemployment suddenly found a divine purpose that would reshape the global landscape for the next century and beyond. To understand the sheer scale of this awakening, one must look at the arsenal of democracy, a term that became the rallying cry for a production miracle that remains unmatched to this day. American factories, which had been producing family cars and simple washing machines, were converted almost overnight into the lungs and muscles of the Allied war machine. By 1943, the United States was producing more aircraft than all the Axis powers combined, turning out a new B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes at the Willow Run plant alone. This was not just about cold machines, it was about the legendary ingenuity of the American worker, from the Rosie the Riveters, who stepped onto the assembly lines, to the visionary engineers who reinvented logistics on the fly. You might think such a rapid, violent shift in the economy would lead to internal chaos, but instead, it led to a level of efficiency that saw the United States building entire cargo ships, like the famous Liberty ships, in less than 5 days. This industrial tidal wave ensured that for every single tank the enemy managed to destroy, 10 more were already on their way to the front lines, backed by the limitless resources of a continent-sized powerhouse. The transformation of the American landscape during these years was not limited to the industrial centers of the North or the shipyards of the coasts. It was a total reimagining of what a nation could achieve when every citizen was pulling in the same direction. In the heartland, farmers produced record-breaking harvests to feed not only our own troops but also our allies who were starving under the weight of occupation, a feat that turned the American tractor into a weapon as vital as any tank. This era saw the birth of a new kind of American identity, one that was forged in the heat of a global crisis and tempered by the shared sacrifice of rationing sugar, tires, and gasoline without a single word of complaint. It is truly remarkable to consider that while the rest of the world was crumbling, the American people were building a foundation of resilience that would support the weight of global leadership for a century, proving that our greatest strength has always been our ability to turn an existential threat into an opportunity for unprecedented national growth. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss your daily dose of audio history, and if you are finding this story as inspiring as I am, please hit that like button to help us grow. The transition from the factory floor to the smoke-filled battlefield was marked by a series of strategic gambles and acts of individual heroism that defied the odds of modern war. In the Pacific, the United States Navy faced a daunting, near-impossible task, fighting across vast oceanic distances where every tiny island was a fortified fortress. At the Battle of Midway in June 1942, the tide of the entire war turned in just 4 minutes of intense, heart-stopping combat, as American dive bombers caught the Japanese carriers at their most vulnerable moment. It was a moment where perfect preparation met divine opportunity, and the courage of pilots who knew they might not have enough fuel to return home secured a victory that broke the back of the enemy's naval power forever. But what is truly surprising is that while this desperate struggle was happening, the United States was simultaneously preparing for a massive, multinational invasion of the European continent, a feat of two-front warfare that most military experts believed was impossible to sustain for any length of time. The logistical genius of the United States military during this period was perhaps its most underrated weapon, as it managed to supply millions of troops across two vast oceans with everything from chocolate bars to heavy artillery. In Europe, the American commanders knew that to defeat the Axis, they had to strike directly at the heart of the Fortress Europe, which led to the planning of Operation Overlord. This was the largest amphibious invasion in history, involving over 150,000 troops on the very first day alone, June 6, 1944. As the Higgins boats dropped their ramps on the beaches of Normandy, the entire world held its breath in collective silence. The soldiers who waded into the freezing water under a hail of machine gun fire were not professional warriors or mercenaries. They were teachers, farmers, and clerks who carried the hopes of the entire world on their backs. Their success was not guaranteed by any stretch of the imagination, but their determination was absolute, and by nightfall, the Atlantic Wall had been breached, beginning the final liberation of a continent that had almost lost its soul. As the Allied forces pushed toward Germany, the American spirit of innovation continued to manifest in ways that would catch the enemy completely off guard and change the nature of science itself. While the ground war raged, American scientists and engineers were working in total secrecy on projects that would leapfrog decades of technological development in a matter of months. We often speak of the atomic bomb, but the development of advanced radar, the proximity fuse, and mass-produced penicillin were equally vital in saving millions of lives and ensuring a swift end to the conflict. It is fascinating to realize that at the height of the war, the United States was spending more on research and development than it had spent on its entire military just a single decade prior. This commitment to being the best, the fastest, and the most advanced created a momentum that was impossible for any regime to stop. The American soldier was the best equipped in the history of warfare, backed by a nation that refused to let them go into a fair fight, always seeking the decisive, overwhelming advantage. Even as the victory in Europe seemed certain, the American spirit was tested once more in the brutal, sun-scorched jungles and black sand beaches of the Pacific, where the strategy of island hopping became a masterclass in naval and aerial coordination. From the terrifying heights of Mount Suribachi on Iwo Jima to the grueling, 82-day struggle for Okinawa, the American fighting man displayed a level of tenacity that forced the world to redefine its understanding of human endurance. What often surprises historians is how, in the midst of this carnage, the United States was already looking toward the peace, designing a global system that would favor open seas and free trade over the old imperial systems of the past. This foresight meant that the blood spilled on those distant islands was not just for the conquest of land, but for the liberation of a global economy that would eventually lift hundreds of millions out of poverty and establish a new, permanent standard of international cooperation. Our journey through this era of transformation continues, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like to support our daily history series. By the time 1945 arrived, the global order had been completely overturned, and the United States stood at the center of a new, terrifying, yet hopeful reality. The war ended not just with a military victory, but with a grand vision for a world where such a catastrophe would never be allowed to happen again. With the signing of the United Nations Charter in San Francisco and the establishment of the Bretton Woods system, America took on the heavy role of the world's architect. For the first time in modern history, a dominant power did not seek to colonize or enslave its defeated enemies, but instead sought to rebuild them through the generous Marshall Plan. This was a masterstroke of diplomacy and humanity, providing over $13 billion in aid to rebuild Western Europe, ensuring that prosperity would be the best possible defense against future instability. It was an era where the American dollar became the bedrock of global trade, and the American promise became the light that many nations looked toward in the dark, hungry aftermath of the war. The reflex of this period on the American home front was a golden age of prosperity that felt like a just reward for the long years of sacrifice and fear. The soldiers returned home not to a depleted or broken economy, but to a nation that was ready and eager to build the future with its own hands. The GI Bill allowed millions of veterans to attend college and buy homes, creating a massive, educated middle class that would drive the global economy for decades to come. Suburbs began to rise where there was once only forest. The interstate highway system was conceived to connect the vast country, and the American dream became a tangible reality for more people than ever before in human history. This was the moment the United States truly became a superpower, not just in military terms of bombs and planes, but in cultural and economic influence that reached every corner of the globe. From the music on the radio to the cars on the road, the world began to look to America as the blueprint for what a modern, free, and prosperous society could achieve. Reflecting on this period, we see that the rise of the United States was not merely a result of geography, resources, or luck, but a result of a specific, powerful set of values, courage, industry, and an unshakable belief in a better tomorrow. The short-term reflexes of World War II established a framework for international cooperation and domestic growth that we still benefit from every single day. It reminds us that when we are united by a common, noble purpose, there is no challenge too great to overcome and no darkness too deep to dispel. The legacy of those years is written in the freedom of billions of people and the enduring strength of a nation that found its true voice in the loudest roar of history. As we look back at the greatest generation, let us carry their pride and their resolve into our own time, honoring the immense sacrifices they made to ensure that the flame of liberty would never go out. Thank you for joining us for this epic chapter of our history. Please subscribe to the channel for your daily dose of audio history and hit the like button if you enjoyed this tribute to the American spirit.